The aftermath of World War II left a world grappling with immense change. Amidst this global upheaval, the British Empire still maintained control over Palestine, a region of immense strategic and historical significance. This land held profound religious importance for both Jews and Arabs, a place where their histories and faiths intertwined. The horrors of the Holocaust had created a desperate need for a safe haven, and Jewish survivors, carrying the weight of unimaginable suffering, sought a homeland where they could rebuild their lives and ensure their safety. Driven by this yearning for security and self-determination, they began moving to Palestine in increasing numbers, hoping to establish a new nation rooted in their ancestral heritage. However, Palestine was already home to Palestinian Arabs, whose families had resided there for generations, cultivating the land and building their communities. They watched with growing anxiety as the influx of Jewish immigrants threatened to displace them, fearing the loss of their ancestral home and way of life. As tensions escalated, acts of violence became increasingly frequent, with clashes erupting between Jewish and Arab groups, each determined to defend their claims to the land. These groups, fueled by deep-seated fears and aspirations, engaged in a bitter struggle, each fighting for what they believed was their rightful future. The British, facing mounting pressure and unable to maintain order in the increasingly volatile environment, ultimately decided to withdraw from Palestine. They handed the responsibility for resolving the complex situation to the newly formed United Nations, hoping for a peaceful resolution. In 1947, the UN proposed a partition plan, a bold attempt to divide Palestine into two independent states. One state was to be Jewish, providing a homeland for the Jewish people, and the other Arab, ensuring self-determination for the Palestinian Arabs. The city of Jerusalem, revered by both faiths, was designated as an international city, to be governed by a special international regime. Jewish leaders, recognizing the historic significance of the opportunity, accepted the UN Partition Plan. They saw it as a crucial step towards realizing their long-held dream of establishing a sovereign country where they could live in peace and security. However, Arab leaders vehemently rejected the plan, viewing it as a grave injustice. They argued that it unfairly allocated their land to newcomers, disregarding the rights and aspirations of the existing Palestinian population. With the seeds of discord sown and the prospect of a peaceful resolution fading, the stage was set for a larger, more devastating conflict. As the British prepared to formally leave Palestine, the region teetered on the brink of war. Both sides, armed with determination and a sense of impending destiny, readied themselves for the inevitable clash. On May 14, 1948, a pivotal day in history, the world watched as events unfolded in the Middle East. As the last British soldiers departed from Palestine, marking the end of their mandate, Jewish leaders gathered in Tel Aviv. There, they made a momentous declaration, the establishment of the State of Israel. For Jewish people worldwide, scattered across continents and yearning for a homeland, this was a moment of profound hope and jubilation. It signified the end of centuries of exile and persecution, a chance to build a new life in their ancestral land. But for the Arab world, the declaration was met with dismay and anger. It was viewed as a catastrophe, a painful loss of their land and displacement of their people, a wound that would fester for generations. The very next day, armies from neighboring Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, launched a coordinated invasion. Their stated aim was clear: to dismantle the newly formed State of Israel and prevent its consolidation. Israel, facing a coalition of powerful adversaries, was significantly outnumbered and outgunned. Its survival hung precariously in the balance as its soldiers fought desperately to defend their nascent nation. Amidst the escalating conflict, both the United States and the Soviet Union, despite their ideological differences, swiftly recognized the State of Israel. However, this diplomatic recognition did little to quell the raging fires of war. The invading Arab armies possessed superior military equipment and a larger arsenal. In contrast, Israel was forced to rely on hastily assembled militias, often composed of civilian volunteers with limited training. The fate of the entire region and the lives of countless people hung precariously in the balance as the war intensified. Jerusalem, a city steeped in history and religious significance, became the war's fiercest and most symbolic battleground. Its ancient walls and holy sites were now at the epicenter of a brutal conflict, with both sides vying for control of this strategic and spiritually important location. The city held immense importance, sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, each with deep historical and religious ties to the land. The stakes were incredibly high, as control of Jerusalem meant more than just military victory. It represented a profound spiritual triumph. The Jewish quarter in the Old City, a historic enclave, ultimately fell to the well-trained and equipped Arab Legion, while Israeli forces, though outnumbered in that sector, managed to hold the western part of the city under a tight siege. In the face of this adversity, Israel's military, which was newly formed from various underground groups like the Haganah, was officially unified into a more cohesive fighting force known as the Israel Defense Forces. Despite being significantly outmatched in terms of manpower and equipment, Israeli fighters displayed unwavering determination to defend their newly declared nation. Crucially, weapons and supplies began arriving from abroad, with a significant contribution coming from Czechoslovakia, which helped to even the odds and bolster the Israeli forces' capabilities. To circumvent the siege and resupply their forces, Israelis ingeniously built the secret Burma Road, a clandestine route designed to break the siege of western Jerusalem and bring much-needed supplies. Across the country, emboldened Israeli forces launched a series of counterattacks that successfully pushed back the initial Arab advances. As a result of these victories, the tide of war began to perceptibly turn, and Israel was no longer solely focused on defending its territory, but was now capable of launching offensives and advancing into enemy-held areas. As fighting spread, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs fled or were expelled in an event known as the Nakba, or catastrophe. Refugees crowded into camps in neighboring countries, expecting a quick return that never came. The refugee crisis became permanent, shaping Palestinian identity for generations. The United Nations tried to mediate, sending Count Folke Bernadotte, who was assassinated for his efforts. The conflict drew in global powers. The US saw Israel as a democratic ally, while the Soviet Union shifted support to Arab states. The war's outcome fueled anger and instability across the region, entangling the local conflict in Cold War politics. By early 1949, Israel had pushed back the invading armies and captured more territory than the UN plan had allotted. Exhausted, both sides agreed to armistice lines, the Green Line, which became Israel's borders until 1967. Jerusalem's Old City remained under Jordanian control. Gaza was administered by Egypt. The war ended, but peace did not follow. Israel celebrated survival and began absorbing waves of Jewish immigrants. For Palestinians, the Nakba meant statelessness and life in refugee camps. The unresolved issues, Jerusalem, borders, refugees, became sources of lasting conflict. The 1948 war's legacy of bitterness and mistrust still shapes the Middle East today.